Oh, you wanted me to actually do the... Okay. Hi, Nutty Bites friends and listeners and wireless companions. Wow, I'm lost. I don't normally do this. I mean, hi, everybody. I'm Tech. Nutty's here, though. She's still here. Hold on. Let me unlock her out of the trunk here. Take the tape off. Okay, you can talk now, Nutty.
Hi, I'm Nuke Jess.
I didn't actually kidnap Nutty.
No,
I wouldn't do that.
You don't have to. We live together.
Hold on. Let me go down into the root cellar. Let me go unlock the cage we keep Vox in. Add in Foley noises of me going. There we go. Thump, 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 thump.
No Foley.
Voice code
better.
activated.
It's been like 3 months I've been stuck in here.
You shut up and you eat your bucket of fish heads.
Somehow I'm in a different country or a different province now.
If you don't put the lotion on your skin, you get the root cellar again.
There was that joke of on Futurama where they're going into a bunker underneath the White House and you need like a palm scan identifier. So Zap Brannigan puts his hand down, but he's wearing those big white gloves on his velour uniform. He puts his gloved hand on the pad and it goes, "Identity confirmed. Glove recognized. Welcome, Mrs. Eisenhower."
I was going to say goodbye horses, but...
And so what are we talking about today, Tech?
Today I wanted, besides all this sillery and buffoonery, I would like to talk about media that's been adapted into video games. And I want to talk about this over history. So we're going to start in the early days. We're going to move on through the 90s into modern days. And all of this is just a thinly veiled attempt to talk about. I just saw yesterday on Steam, they've announced a new old cartoon show that I watched as a kid that is now being adapted into a video game, and I got to talk about it. So we'll do an episode. But I want to start at the very, very, very beginning. But before I start there, I'll ask the two of you very quickly, Nutty, what are some of your experiences with media that's been adapted into video game form?
So I am going to preface this with, in my belief system, is that books turned into video games has a much better track record than TV shows or movies turned into video games.
I don't think that's controversial.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We'll get there as we keep talking, but that's not controversial.
That said, I think I have more experience playing or watching video games that were the other way. Honestly, usually I thought these are all trash because they are terrible. It never works out. The ET curse strikes. Sorry, but Turtles was not a good video game. But
what?
Nope, I didn't like it.
Turtles in Time?
Yeah,
probably one of the greatest side-scrolling beat-em-ups of all time.
I don't know if it was Turtles in Time or if it was a precursor to that.
There are other Turtles games that aren't good.
Yeah. There's the Turtles Nintendo game.
Yeah, that's
which has got that one stupid jump in the sewer that kills everybody.
Yes, that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I
and
refuse.
the underwater level with the electric seaweed. Yeah,
I never got there.
Okay.
So
that's the cursed reason why every game seemed to have an underwater level after that.
So, but I think it was GoldenEye, but it was the 007 game for the N64.
That's GoldenEye.
That was the one that told me, oh, you know what? Sometimes this can.
How about you, Vox? What's your experience with media turned to video games?
Well, I will say GoldenEye is the gold standard from its era of video game adaptations of media. Although it is also the friendship ruiner. If anybody,
that multiplayer,
odd job in multiplayer. No, thank you. But for me, it was very much the reason why I think books translate better, or it resonates that books translate better, is despite the fact that there are good ones, so many of those early 90s adaptations were blatant cash grabs. And I remember the cash grabs. I remember the ones that were, hey, everybody liked this game, so we'll make this version of it with someone you know from a movie. It goes back to like the Indiana Jones games that are just blatant ripoffs of Pitfall and things like that, where it's Pitfall, but with Indiana Jones's name on it. And
you see that even today in video games on Steam, where there's a whole rash of things they call asset flips.
Yeah.
where they take an engine of a game that works and then they just go to like 3D model warehouses and buy a bunch of like free or cheap 3D models, throw them into a game, and then, oh, look, it's a new zombie shooter. No, it's not. It's the same crummy zombie shooter you tried to sell 6 months ago. You're just, you put new zombie models in it, you know?
There's also the history of a really good game that came out of, it was originally supposed to be based on the Star Wars franchise, and something happened, and then they had to create their own story that gave us Mass Effect.
They lost the franchise, so they were 90, somehow percent done with the Star Wars game, and they just changed the skin on everything, and they gave us Mass Effect, which ended up being one of the great franchises of all time. There's also there's got to be a name for this, but there's this whole market of like bad games where they're blatant cash grabs. So it's not Call of Duty, it's Call of Duties, plural, or the Calls of Duty. And then it's just the cheaply made first-person shooter using the same font and a similar graphic, hoping to confuse grandparents, looking to buy like last-minute birthday gifts or something.
Oh, yeah. They've got that in movies too. That's how you end up with like Transmorphers.
Oh yeah.
Or the there was a company called Asylum Films that did this. They were notorious for it. In the time between a trailer for a movie coming out and the movie coming out, which is about a 4 to 5 month span at this point, they would entirely produce and put to shelves back in the day on rental places a version of that movie with a slightly different name that's just completely garbage. So that the movie is in theaters, but someone goes to the rental store and goes, oh, this is already out, and grabs it for their kids.
Right.
And so there was the video game equivalent to that. Like a lot of shovelware software was that.
You had that Transformers reference, and all I could think of was GoBots.
Well, GoBots was a completely different franchise with a completely different, with a TV show and a different toy line. And like,
but it was they like Transformers. Let's do GoBots.
Well, yeah, but one could argue like GoBots was successful. Like they had like a TV show on the air. It wasn't as freaking cheap and blatant as what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But if I think back, I'm thinking back through my history banks, trying to think of like the first adaptation of a video game, of a movie into a video game that I can think of was and I'm sure there's one before and somebody's going to actually me on the Discord, but the one that I can think of that I played was those old Star Wars vector graphics games that came out like 1982. So these things were quarter gobblers. And this started the whole thing of, an arcade game based on a really fun scene in an action movie where I can fly the X-Wing down the Death Star Trench, or I can pilot my speeder bike through the trees of the forest moon of Endor, which looks a lot like British Columbia for some reason. Who doesn't want to do that? And being able to put yourself in the movie, I mean, these things, they ate up every allowances worth of quarters were lost to these machines because they made it possible for you to be in an action movie. And that's really fun. And that's really cool. And when those games got successful, everybody tried to make a video game based on a movie because they want to put you in that movie. They want you to play Indiana Jones. They want you to play, whoever. They want to have fun with it. So many games were made, not just of movies, but of a bunch of different things. So many games were made in this 82 to 84 time frame that it actually crashed the video game market. There was a time they didn't think that video games were going to recover, that it was a passing fad, because the entire market crashed. The entire industry lost billions on the low quality control, high prices, and the fact that the games were just crap.
When you think about the fact that the game Tron came out the same year as E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
Oof.
Now, Tron was a really good. That's arguably one of the better examples of those early games that was an adaptation. Probably because the material, the source material, makes it perfect for a video game. You're going into a computer.
Yeah, and E.T., I mean, could kind of lend itself to an adventure game, but the E.T. game that came out in 83 for the 2600 is the worst video game ever made. I mean, okay, there's a couple others that people could argue are worse.
But that it's kind of the benchmark, you know?
So, yeah, if GoldenEye is the gold standard of video game adaptations in the early days,
The brown standard.
E.T. is the tinfoil standard.
Yeah, it's
because you want to wrap it in tinfoil before
the
you bury it
rough
so it doesn't
standard,
get out.
What is it that there's like all these cartridges that were like just dumped and buried somewhere?
They were buried in the middle of a desert in Nevada and left there. And I think someone dug them up at some point in time.
and they found them. They found it was the warehouse just buried all of these things in a dump somewhere, and then somebody went and excavated them. But Cinemassacre.com, the guy that does the Angry Video Game Nerd, actually did a movie about the excavation where the nerd was traveling to the desert to go uncover these games. But I've never seen the movie, but it does look really funny.
I bet in reality it was the GeoGuessr guy that can guess anything by the grass around. Is the guy that found it. It was Rainbolt that found it.
So like 80s, that's like really, really early stuff. Like we're talking pre-Nintendo, we're talking you know.
Yeah, and the games were so bad they crashed the industry.
Yeah.
But that reminds me of my very, very first memory of something real adapted to video games. The early California games or the Olympic games.
Yeah.
Those are very early, like back in the day we had a Tandy 1000, and that was that had those games where it's one floppy disk, it's like 96K the game in size was, which at the time was revolutionary, and it had the early 16-bit graphics, everything like that. Like there was those are hallmarks for me of video game development, right? Where it's like, this is a step well above what I'd seen before in a way that was mind blowing.
Speaking of floppy disk game, there was a game that we absolutely loved in my house, and it was Bruce Lee. It was a side scroller. You played, it was very pixelated. We played this on the Commodore 128. It was a Commodore 64 game. Bruce Lee was just like, what was it? Yellow legs and a white top. And it was, and sometimes you'd go against a sumo wrestler. And the problem was there was a glitch, and you'd basically play until the glitch killed you. If you were good. You either died or the glitch killed you, which was very frustrating. But it was such a fun game at the time. So I do have to mention.
The Commodore 64 was actually really great for adaptations. It had Spy versus Spy.
Ooh.
There was a really good Spy versus Spy one, which was a 2-player kind of like on the same, or you would play against one of the other spies, but it was set up traps, run around this, essentially like a Scooby-Doo house where you go in one door, come out somewhere completely different kind of thing. And I think they had a Star Trek game back then, like that, that was like an early days one that was more just like, it was like a Zork style game where it was more text based than anything, but you had the visuals every once in a while.
The beauty of the Commodore 64 as compared to something like an Atari is that the platform was open and that anybody could develop a game. You didn't need a developer's kit. You didn't need a license. It's like the fact that anybody could code a game, put it on a floppy, give it to his friends, and then, we're talking shareware. We're talking about BBSs. The fact that anybody could put a video game out there and then have it spread through word of mouth, and then everybody is playing your game.
Yeah. And you can hide it in the OED so your mom doesn't know that you have a video game in the house, and you have a disc that's a non-educational game disc. They fit really well.
Come on. Everybody's computer had a file folder on the desktop called homework.
I mean, I had the almost the opposite thing is my father had every video game system that came out, got us everything that came out because he wanted to play them. Although now he doesn't understand video games anymore, but it's that kind of thing where it's like we had every system.
Lucky.
Yeah.
We got the NES because my aunt gave it to us for Christmas, so my parents couldn't get rid of it.
So with Nintendo, to my two friends here in the chat, I have put a logo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is LJN?
All
right,
never speak that name aloud. No.
Sorry.
So that is LJN was a publisher of video games for the Nintendo and for a couple other systems. But they were the kings of the cash grab that Vox was talking about, where if a movie was going to come out, they would buy the license and then make the worst video games of all time. I am sure that this whole trope that you talked about, Nutty, of video games, movies being turned into video games never being very good, is LJN's fault.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Because and this company, they were profitable. They made millions because a kid at the rental store or a kid at the video game store sees, the new X-Men video game is out, or there's a G.I. Joe video game, or whatever it is. They don't know to look for publisher marks. They don't know what it is. They want to play a video game where they get to play as Cyclops or Wolverine, and then they play the game, and it's crap because these were the cheapest made, the worst. And Nintendo had some games with amazing quality. None of them were LJN.
I mean, they had their moments. They had a few moments every once in a while where something decent would come out from them. Because I have fond memories of the Back to the Future games from them, which were more side-scrolling platformers that didn't make sense as an actual Back to the Future game, but they were still fun.
Yeah.
That's where it was occasionally. I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Right, that kind of theory.
Even like the Game Pro magazines, the ones that never had anything bad to say about a game, the one that they would review everything was like a 7 to a 9. Yeah. Even them at one point, I remember seeing like a snippet from a page where there's a new LJN game coming out, and the only thing they can say is that it's more adventure made in that unique LJN style.
Yeah, they were also heavily tied to WWF.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were the ones who made a run of toys for them as well.
Right.
They were a toy company.
The big rubber ones with like the ring.
Kind of, yeah. That was one of the lines, but they're also a very sought after collectible now because they made just a vast array of them.
Right.
So people that you wouldn't expect would have one. It's the same thing with wrestling where it's like, we'll shotgun out everybody who ever had something. Oh, look, they had that guy show up, MVP, the guy with the baseball face. He's going to have one now, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like even the jobbers had them. So that was their modus operandi was take a thing we have a license to and throw everything at it.
So the opposite side of the coin for LJN. Would that have been Infocom, the maker of Zork, the maker of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the other great text-based adventure? Because I know that's a little bit previous to the Nintendo, but they just made awesome
Was Zork
games.
a book?
No, but Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was. So.
Those games were great. There's also Starship Titanic.
Yes.
Which is another one. Like those games, all those games were great.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
You guys, I never played the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy one, which I really wish I did. You played it?
No.
Oh.
Probably way back in the day, yeah.
I really wanted to play I think I played the Starship Titanic one for a little bit.
Yeah, we got all of our games for the Commodore through our cousins because my parents wouldn't let us get games. Even though if they actually looked at text-based adventures, they probably would have liked it. But apparently they came with something called Feelies. So the Hitchhiker's one came with a pin on button that said "Don't panic." You got a small plastic packet containing pocket fluff, an order of destruction for Arthur Dent's house, things written in Vogan. I mean, just all sorts of little gifts with your game. And all I'm thinking is I remember getting Zork. I remember getting the other things. I'm like, we never got any of these feelies.
You played Myst and Riven, didn't you?
No, I got lost. I could never figure out my way out of that. There was no instructions. I was like, all right, I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know what's happening.
Myst really does seem like it was your type of game. So man, LJN, man. And then that led to the I have it written in my notes here. I'm like, why were they all crap? Well, because they were cash grabs.
Yeah.
But at this time in the 90s, though,
Mm-hmm.
even like there were some pretty successful movies turned into video games. And I got 3 examples, and they're all arcade. Because the arcade, the amount of computing power and the peripherals and everything that you could put into an arcade box far outshone what you could do in a home console at the time. So the home console ports tended to suffer, and most of that was due to LJN. But like an example, Terminator 2.
Yeah.
The Super Nintendo and Genesis ones, and I think Game Boy. Anyway, they're bad. But the one in the arcade with the actual gun that you shot at and it shook in your hands that you shot at, that was a fun quarter gobbler.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of them were, is they were great in arcade, and everybody went, we can move these to the home platforms now.
Yeah.
And no.
Two other quick examples of really, really good ones. The Turtles, the TMNT side-scrolling beat-em-ups. But even then, the side-scrolling beat-em-ups on Super Nintendo were absolutely fantastic. It was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video game for the Nintendo. It had 2 modes, one where you were like top down on a map, and then there were like side-scrolling inside the levels. It was crap. It was way too hard.
That made me. I'm a huge Turtles fan. I never played another Turtles video game after that.
The side-scrolling ones are great because there's a lot of like gags.
Yeah.
And stuff that they throw in from the cartoons. The last one I want to talk about of these arcade games that were made into brilliant crossovers or adaptations there was a side-scrolling Simpsons beat-em-up that you could play 4-player. Like if you played as Marge Simpson, she was beating people up with her vacuum cleaner. It was an awesome side-scrolling beat-em-up. But the Nintendo Simpsons games, there was Bart's Nightmare and Attack of the Killer Space Mutants, or Attack of the Space Mutants, I think was the other. They sucked. They were hard.
But Bart's skateboard game on the Game Boy was actually pretty decent.
Was there a Bart skateboard game?
Basically Paperboy, but it was Bart skateboarding on the original Game Boy.
There was also talking about adaptations. There's the Simpsons version of Crazy Taxi. It's literally just Crazy Taxi, but with Simpsons vehicles.
Yeah, Simpsons Hit and Run.
Yeah.
People still speed run that game to this day.
I saw a whole development series where somebody was remaking that game in Unity, and it was him showing how he was making all the assets and everything. It was wild. You talk about good ones too. The RoboCop adaptation comes to mind.
There's a recent one.
Well, there's a bunch of them, but the old 1989 one, which was again a cabinet coin gobbler, that translated fairly well over. But when we're talking SNES era, there's one that just came to mind that is for me it's obscure, but I loved, and it was the old Shadowrun game.
Oh, it was like a 3/4 isometric role playing game.
So they had 2 of them. They had a Genesis one, and then they had an SNES one. The Genesis one. Yes, they are. Yeah. The Genesis one had a little bit of it. It was the isometric. It was it was a little more side scrolling in my mind. I can't remember, but it had a really great representation of the virtual reality matrix that's a hallmark of Shadowrun. Like its hacking mini games were better. The one I will always think of though is the isometric Super Nintendo one, because that was a game where you had a definitive end goal, but on an SNES game, you could accomplish it in more than one way.
Right.
It wasn't a side scroller. It wasn't a platformer. It was, here is a world you can live in. It was the very early days of an open world game.
I remember renting that thing and spending weekends trying to figure out what to do with it. But there's one part in the early couple of acts of the game where you discover there's a bomb in your head. Yeah, and it starts a timer. I have never ever found out how to get rid of that bomb in your head. I have turned my neck into a volcano as my head explodes so many times playing that cursed game.
And it also has the best opening for a video game I've seen in ages. It still resonates to this day, where you literally open up on the slab in a morgue.
Yeah.
You
wake up in the cooler.
You push yourself out of the cooler, and carry on
and scare the two
yes.
morgue technicians.
Yes. So that was one of the first really good, like, that got me into the Shadowrun world. It's the first game that was a video game that got me into the other property. And I love that. I love it for that because I'm obsessed to this day with that properties.
And you know what? For a franchise as big and deep as Shadowrun, it is weird that we haven't had another decent video game.
I was going to say decent we haven't had, but back in the days of, I think it was Xbox 360, they had one that was just, they took the Shadowrun IP and they made a really crappy Counter-Strike-esque shooter out of it.
Yeah, I remember trying to be excited about that. And, yeah.
It was so bad. And they've had a couple of good ones with the, their like old school feels, the Shadowrun Hong Kong, Boston Lockdown, and a few ones that were Kickstartered ones. And there's a whole trilogy of them that came out that were really kind of good. But that was like more of a fan thing than an official one, and it got official licensing eventually.
I would hate for a Shadowrun game to come out now because all of like everyone would just review it and go, nah, it's just Cyberpunk with elves. They're just trying to rip off Cyberpunk. It's like, no, Shadowrun's been around since the 80s, dude.
Yeah.
No, it's just a rip off.
Well, they came out like within a year of each other, I think, the two games.
Yeah.
And I think like nothing will ever. Yeah, there's some bad reviews from people I really love as authors that just make me shake my head. Like William Gibson hates Shadowrun, like hates it with a passion. And but that's an example though of one of those games that's what a video game adaptation of something should be. It should be something that draws you in and makes you wonder where it came from. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's where that went for me. And then as that era progressed, like the cash grabs never went away. I've discovered a company here that was notorious for this, is Blast Entertainment. Mm-hmm. Their whole thing was taking licensed games, and they were essentially they were aimed at kids, but they were like, here's this cool thing you love. Play this silly mini game, and you'll unlock a movie. You'll unlock a skit, and it'll go on to another and another to make a whole story. But their library just makes me laugh because it's Casper's Scare School, Casper and the Ghostly Trio, Charlotte's Web, An American Tale, and Little Britain the video game.
Little Britain
the video game.
Oh my.
It's like kids game. Wait, don't let your kids do this.
So, another great franchise that's been adapted into some pretty decent games and also some crap we got to talk about is Aliens.
Yeah.
They've done some pretty decent video games from it. Now, they did some really crappy LJN games in the 90s, but there's been a couple shooters that have come out recently that are quite good. Another one that you were talking about throwing stuff at the wall and see what bites, or just take a franchise and just do everything with it. Man, let's talk about Games Workshop.
Ooh, yeah.
Because there was a couple Games Workshop video games in the 90s, like a couple Warhammer ones that were kind of good. Not bad. But recently, in the last, let's say, 3-4 years, Games Workshop has been, well, instead of spending a lot of money to make one good game that maybe nobody will buy, why don't we spend not a lot of money and make a lot of video games that maybe a couple of people will buy each, and then maybe a whale will spend a lot of money in one, and then we'll get a little bit of a return on an investment, and that's more profitable than putting all of our eggs in the big AAA basket. Because who has $100 million to spend in a video game development now? So they have been churning out, like, I can't count how many Warhammer gotcha games there are available for my phone right now. There must be over a dozen.
I mean, Tacticus being the big one right now.
Tacticus being the big one, but there's a bunch of other ones, which is, and they're all the same. They're all either little tower defense games or they're little tactical beat 'em ups, because they're the ones that are easiest to make. It's like they're the easiest to code. They're the easiest to turn a profit on. They've had some success with AAA titles. I mean, let's talk about Space Marine 2. They're both very, very good and very pretty games. But this model of let's make a bunch of crap and see what sticks kind of hurts, especially because it's a franchise I love so much that I want to play good video games in the 40K universe. Another great one we've both played was Rogue Trader.
Mm-hmm.
A great role-playing game. Probably one of the best classic role-playing games I've played in the last few years. I really enjoyed it. It's almost as good as Baldur's Gate 3. Kind of plays a lot like Baldur's Gate 3, but it's set in the 40K universe.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish there was more like it.
I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 now is the epitome of what you should do when you're adapting something to a video game. But that's from the company that had lineage in doing those.
That's Larian, right?
Yeah, that's Larian. Rogue Trader is Owlcat Studios. They had their own history of really good stuff too. Mm-hmm. The other one that falls into this category of absolute shovelware garbage, to the point where they don't even have their own good video game, is the Game of Thrones franchise, because HBO has nothing to do with it. They just licensed it to everybody that made a game. So that old goofy Ebony game that used to advertise with like adult models and going, this game's for adults only. Yeah. Watch this now.
What would you like me to do, my lord?
If you're not at work, you can play this game. Well, they have a version of that's Game of Thrones. They have like 80 Game of Thrones if you go into Google Play on your phone, there's 80 different games, and none of them have a coherent theme. None of them are well developed. They just have the characters appear in them.
And there's I see this ad, or I've seen this ad many times, of one of the pretty girls from Game of Thrones, and it just says, when you play this game, you can do anything you want. And just
that's that awful AI trend now, is doing that with way too much of everything. But if games done right, Shadows of Mordor, the Mordor series from Lord of the Rings.
That's the third person kind of a stealth beat 'em up with the
yes, yeah.
That game was awesome and had Nutty. If you've never seen me play that game, it has one of the most interesting mechanics in it that I really wish they would put into other games, where it would randomly create boss orcs that were the bad guys that you had to hunt down and kill in the game. And then as you killed them, you would sort of like unlock the higher level ones that you had to go fight. Mm-hmm. But if, let's say, one of them I killed by putting an arrow through his eye, later on the game, he'd come back angry, and now he's got a big scar and an eye patch. Nice. Or you cut like one guy's arm off, and he's got this like big mangled scar, and they get like bonuses based on the way that you killed them, because now they're mad and they're coming at you. And you kill a guy 3-4 times, he comes back and he's like all mangled up and he's like super mad at you and he's got like all these deformities. That's so cool. And they get names. They get like special titles based on what you've done to them or if they've gotten you back. And then all of a sudden it's Groknor the thrice slain, you know.
Yes, I do remember that now.
Yes.
Okay.
And even
the thrice slain, now
they also have something that if they beat you, they get better. Like, and it's called the Nemesis system. Yeah. The reason
I wish they put that into other games.
The reason they don't do that is because that company owns the rights to it. They patented that system 100% down to the wire. Yeah. And that's something I don't like about video game developers, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, it kind of goes into that. We were talking about how in the early days with the floppy disk,
yeah,
it was you'd make a game and it'd become popular and that was the reward.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in the early days, there was no patenting. There was no there was no you can't do this, because there were people building mods for games all the time.
Yeah.
Or just taking a game and then changing it. So there was the good parts about that and the bad parts.
Yeah.
But now everything's locked down with IP, which, again, good parts and bad parts. But one of the bad parts is, I've now patented the Nemesis system. Nobody else can use that.
Yeah. And
imagine if GoldenEye had patented the the player versus player mechanic.
Yeah.
There'd be no Call of Duty PvP.
Yeah.
Because that's really where that came from.
If they did Doom would have, like Quake would never exist. A bunch of other games would never exist because of this. And it's
GoldenEye struck on something because it was on Nintendo, is that Nintendo is and was and forever will be the king of couch co-op.
Mm-hmm.
That there is no system, there is no environment that has done it better for video games to sit on your couch with your best friends and turn them all into enemies. I don't know how many friendships have been ruined by a good old game of Mario Kart, but probably nearly as many as GoldenEye. So I got a question for you guys. Okay, so Vox, you mentioned Game of Thrones. It's a really good example of, man, I wish there could be a decent video game because the world is so good.
Yes.
So much good in that world that you could make some... Imagine a Total War Game of Thrones.
Oh, I was going to say, imagine an Assassin's Creed inspired game where you play as the Faceless and you adapt to your environment. You take a different role on, you go through and you and then you put in like the new, not the new especially, but you could have the Soulsborne kind of thing where someone else joins your game to hunt you down. There's so many different things, like a Souls-like game set even in there where you're playing one person amidst an entire warring country trying to survive. Like there's so much potential in there for it.
Do you know the Dynasty Warriors?
Yes.
Franchise? So to people who don't know, Dynasty Warriors, I thought they got to be up to like 11 or 12 now. They're beat 'em up video games, third person, but you play as a hero from ancient China through like the Three Kingdoms sagas or whatever. You play as one of these heroes, but it's you versus armies of thousands of faceless warriors as you go through and beat them all up because you're almost a god. You have all of these like heroic superpowers. They're really, really fun beat 'em up games, and there's hundreds and hundreds of characters that you can pick from. Imagine a Game of Thrones game done Dynasty Warriors style. Yeah. Where you play as the Lightning Lord Beric Dondarrion, or you play as the Sword of the Morning, or you play as Mance Rayder leading his army towards the wall.
You're hitting on something too that when I go to like the Shadows of Mordor games, the reason those games were so good too is because video games allow you to explore a different space in the world that the show, the book, or anything or other things didn't view, because those are about a parallel story and taking on a whole other realm of it. And so you've got so much potential in so many franchises that could do that.
Lord of the Rings Online did that as well, where you weren't playing as one of the companions heading towards Mordor. You were another group of adventurers sort of paralleling them as they went, and you were the one keeping the hordes off their backs while they went.
And that's where you've got that power with storytelling in video games where you can do that. That's where I love to see it. But instead, companies will just cash grab out, right?
So is there another franchise or another thing that you've seen out there that you would like to see as a video game?
I did want to just kind of throw on, because we were talking about Lord of the Rings Online, and I do think that like STO, Star Trek Online, Dungeons and Dragons Online, Lord of the Rings Online, Knights of the Old Republic Online, I think that was the name of the game, but the Star Wars Online, these were all really successful. But they're not your traditional video game. They're the massive multiplayers. And I think what ended up making all of those work really well is that they leaned in to their franchise. They leaned in. They all came from something that had lots. Okay, so Star Trek and Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars, there's so many books, there's so many shows and movies and everything. And then Lord of the Rings, I mean, just Tolkien just never stopped writing. It's 3 books, and actually technically 4 if you include the Hobbit and then you throw in the Silmarillion, but really like it's just because Tolkien just writes too much. But these were all, I think, massively successful. But there's another group of video games that I really did enjoy. And that's the Arkham games.
Oh, yeah. We didn't even talk about those.
Are heavily based on the animated series and the comic books. But the Arkham series were really, really good.
So good. One of my favorite video game franchises.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's kind of influenced people's love of that franchise. It's not just a video game adaptation. It's, oh man, I am experiencing the, like, what was the Gotham Knights? That's the one that I think has been really fun because it's taken things from the comics.
I don't think that was a Rocksteady game, or was it? But it's in the same vein as the Arcane. It's really good.
Yeah. And because of it, people are, getting a lot of that, understanding these characters in a different way.
Have you played that one, Vox?
I have yet to.
Okay, so you play as the Bat family?
And that's the mechanic that I liked, by the way.
Is that you get, and depending on the level that's coming up and how you want to do it, you get to pick between, do you want to play as Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Babs,
or Harley?
No.
No, I thought Harley was one of them.
Everybody gets to talk to Harley.
Yeah, Harley's a villain in this one. She came out as a playable character in one of the Arkham games as like a DLC.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Drake.
Yeah, Tim Drake's the other one. Now, I will give you one minor spoiler to just a thing in the soundtrack. There is a part where you have to go meet Harley Quinn in prison.
Yeah.
And she stages a breakout. While she distracts you with a balloon, while you're looking at the balloon, she breaks out of prison, and you have to run through fighting all the bad guys during a prison riot to stop Harley. And they set it to a Montreal female punk band cover of Living La Vida Loca.
It's
it is amazing.
Okay, now I got to buy that game.
Yeah. No, Gotham Knights, worth it. Is there a franchise that's due a good video game? You know what? I'll give a good one. Superman. Because Superman 64.
We need one.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Superman 64, probably one of the biggest pieces of trash that's ever been put onto a cartridge. And Superman could be done very easily, I think, as a video game. I mean, there's the what are the DC Street Fighter games? Not Undisputed.
Capcom versus Street Fighter?
No, there's a DC.
Injustice.
Injustice. That's it. Those are pretty good. But as a Superman led game, you could do all kinds of things. You could have a lot of fun with it. Put Superman in his DLC in the One Punch Man game. I want to see Clark Kent fight Saitama.
I'm struggling to think of a franchise I could actually like. I mean, I could easily say Shadowrun.
Yeah,
give me a Cyberpunk 2077 level of love letter to the Shadowrun universe, right? Or we're talking like it needs a new one.
Yeah. No, and the thing is, it builds upon the fact that everybody loved the old game. So if we bring in that modernization, that cyberpunk, that bring something in, make it. I mean, yeah, I think.
But I will say this specifically. I would want an MMO based on it because Shadowrun has always been you're one of a bunch of misfits that are going off and doing government jobs. Yeah. So if you could make it an MMO somehow, I'd be okay with that.
I'm trying to think. What do I want to play as? I'm not really sure. I don't know, but I will say that I want something different. I want something absolutely whackball. No, okay, so there's two things. Sorry. One is I can tack on to what Vox said. Something that needs it, had a game before, needs a love letter in the style that Cyberpunk did. Kindred the Embraced.
So the second Vampire Bloodlines is in my Steam wish list. It's been announced. There's a trailer. I'm waiting for it to show up, but
I'm hoping that it is as good. And then the other thing I'm going to say is let's make it completely whackball, weird, like something soap opera, something like schlocky or, whatever, just completely oddball. It's not about fighting. It's about, what is Dr. Drake Ramore doing this,
not another brain tumor,
that sort of thing. Yeah. Like I'm not a soap opera person, but I think that it could be fun having something completely random. I enjoy the idea of bringing back the idea of, okay, it's not going to be a text-based adventure, but use that kind of model and make it something playable, because there's a lot of game mechanics that we've seen. Is it Dragon Age, I think, where you can skip the combat and just do the role playing? Or you can skip the role playing and just do the combat or something.
A lot of games now have a storyteller mode where they dial back the difficulty of the combat all the way to make it more administrative, so that if you are more into the story, then you're not going to get stuck having to fight the boss of level 3 7 times.
I feel like if you did something like that, it would open it up to a whole new category of gamers. And if you tied it into something that already had such a huge fan following, I mean, you then have, people that would be 100% in. I think that could be a lot of fun. And I think that there's a whole bunch of people that want that kind of game.
So I'll give you a good one. An absolutely great franchise of books, of super popular books in Europe, that got turned into 3 amazing video games is The Witcher.
It's on my list. It's on my list. Yes.
And the games, especially Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is amazing. I haven't been...
And then became a TV show.
And then became a TV show with Superman in it. Yet again, Superman. But there is a scene in Witcher 3 where you meet 3 sister swamp hags. No, I wish it was Tress MacNeille. It'd be a lot less scary. No, they scared the willies out of me. They're actually legit scary video game characters. I haven't been that scared since I remember many years ago playing an Alien versus Predator game where when you play as a colonial marine, you have a choice. You can either equip the flashlight or the motion detector, but not both. So you see the little blip on your motion detector of the alien getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And then I turn the flashlight on and all I can see is teeth on my screen. Man, I fell off my chair. My roommate laughed at me so much. But so The Witcher did really good, but, what's that company? Did
CD
The Witcher
Projekt Red?
Yeah, CD Projekt Red. Crunch issues aside, they can make a pretty darn good game. They've announced The Witcher 4. Can't wait. I'll play it. I'd love to see them, with the care and love that they put into Cyberpunk, if they could put that into 40K, just for me, I'd really like that. But
it wouldn't just be for you; it'd also be for Superman.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
Oh, not him again. Yeah. So I
was just saying today that man needs to be in less. I love him, but he needs to be in less now.
He just needs to come out with his 40K movie.
Yeah.
He's going to be James Bond now, apparently.
Ooh.
That's not, well, okay.
No.
Sure.
No.
He's now the 3rd or 4th person I've now heard that says they're James Bond. Another thing I'd like to talk about is a couple days ago on Steam, they announced a video game release this year of a TV show I watched as a kid that I never saw coming, but my God, that I wish listed this game hard. There is a side-scrolling beat-em-up video game of Samurai Pizza Cats on its way. They have all of the original voice actors.
Oh my!
Of the American dub, not of the Japanese TV show. Because when Hayam Saban brought Samurai Pizza Cats to North America, he had all of the episodes of the original show, but he didn't have a translator to translate the Japanese script into English. So they didn't have the scripts. They just, we can make this into a comedy. And they just wrote their own script of this absolute screwball, fourth wall breaking comedy full of puns and American culture references. None of this is in the original Japanese version.
Yeah.
And that's not the version they're bringing to the video game. No. They're bringing the really horrible screwball version to my video game script. Man, I can't wait. It is going to be so much fun. Just a little teaser they dropped is a conversation between 2 of the Ninja Crows, one named, good God, Jerry Attrick, the old advisor, and Bad Bird. Oh no, it's Jerry Attrick talking to the evil rat that's trying to run the kingdom, named the Big Cheese. And it's everything I loved about the show. Like it's so dumb. It's so silly.
Thinking of what we are seeing that's coming for Samurai Pizza Cats, I've got another game that they could do the same kind of thing to Reboot.
Reboot was one of those things. It's a TV show about video games.
Yeah.
Why the heck couldn't they make
A video game.
A video game out of like you could do a Mario Party style like or a WarioWare where it's you play mini games. Because in the TV show, every episode, the characters who lived inside your computer, inside the mainframe, they would go into a video game and fight the user.
Yeah.
Warning, incoming game. Then this big purple cube would come down from the sky. Reboot was awesome. Reboot would be so great.
I was going to say guilty. I finally thought of a franchise that doesn't have a video game at all that's good or memorable, and that's Highlander. But that's my always obsession.
That's again just for Vox. Like nobody else wants this.
This is the thing. That would be an amazingly fun open world kind of thing where every once in a while you're just walking around doing nothing, and then you get the buzz, and then you have like Bushido Blade style combat happen. And then a lightning show, and then carry on with living your normal life as an antique collector.
But if you get your head cut off, you can never play the game again. You get like IP locked and banned.
There can be only one life.
Right. Until eventually, everybody plays the game. They got this thing going on, and then there's like 4 people left playing. They're all in like corners of the world. They never log on. They never leave their little hideouts. And then all right, well, you got one more month to find, and then there's going to be like one guy left, there can only be one.
And that person wins some ridiculous prize.
He wins choice seating for Highlander 2 when the sequel comes out and makes them all space aliens.
No, he gets choice seating for the Henry Cavill reboot of Highlander, which is a thing.
Again, I'm open to it. Before we wrap up,
Hank, buddy, what are you doing?
Before we wrap up, I do want to throw some honorable mentions for video games that were based on books that are pretty dang popular. So you've already talked about The Witcher. We never mentioned Rainbow Six.
Ooh.
Oh, the Rainbow Six series of games
Clancy's Rainbow Six.
They are very good games. And they were a little different than your regular first-person shooter because you could actually plan your mission into the building before you went and shot the bad guys.
Yeah.
Played a lot of Rainbow Six.
I will say, like, I didn't play Rainbow Six, but I will say it is one of those gold standards. It is definitely like a thing.
There have been other games that have tried and failed to capture that. The Finals comes to mind, but...
And then the last thing I want to mention is a game I've never played, but I've watched a certain Slavic king play, and that's Stalker. Is based on a book called Roadside Picnic. And,
first-person shooter set inside the exclusion zone around Chernobyl, but in this world, they're zombies.
And there's something about it that just kind of tickles that geek brain of yours, And I wonder how many people, well, actually, I have some idea. There's quite a few people that, do that exploring adventure in the real world in the exclusion zone, probably because they were inspired by this.
In that same vein as Stalker, we can also talk about Metro.
Oh, yeah. I've never played it. I know nothing about it.
Zombies take over the world. But you are one of the survivors living in the subway system of Moscow.
Oh. Cool.
And you have to escape this. You can only spend a limited amount of time on the surface because everything is like so diseased and destroyed up there. So it's these like raids that go up onto the surface to look for survivors and to look for materials, and you're beset by monsters. And the last game of the trilogy is you get a train working and you're going across Russia on this big ice train that you use as like your mission hub as you go from place to... They're really cool games.
So what was the book?
Metro.
It was a book of the same name.
Yeah, Metro 2033, and then the sequels were 34 and 35.
Cool. Very cool. I've never played them.
By Dmitry, I'm going to butcher the...
You'll do better than me.
The Russian pronunciation, but Dmitry Gluchovsky. There's a ch in there.
So now you've got me down the rabbit hole of finding out there was apparently a game adaptation, mostly text-based with graphics of Fahrenheit 451.
Okay.
You
I believe it.
You play as one of the underground network of people helping Guy Montag escape retribution. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I honestly, I still believe by sheer numbers, that books tend to translate much better.
Is there a media out there that you do not want to see in a video game?
The Bachelor.
Love Island.
Yeah. Well, actually, that might work for the whole
Naked and Afraid.
50 Shades of Grey.
Oh yeah.
As a text-based adventure game.
I'd say the Three Ninjas franchise, but unfortunately, they made a lot of video games based on them.
Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, or The Fountainhead as an MMO game where you're trying to survive capitalist.
Misery, can you break his ankle?
So look, while we're on
Misery,
this,
but you play as Kathy Bates, not playing as.
No, not as Paul. No. To play a sad sack. Come on.
So while we're on this, there is a game on Steam called Fight of the Gods, where you play as different gods, including Jesus with broken pieces of the cross on your wrist, punching people. It's just like, what is this?
Blasphemy, the video game.
Oh yeah. So there's an adaptation for a lot of things we don't need an adaptation for out there. Yeah, I was gonna say anything that comes out of a certain valley in that's near Hollywood but not quite Hollywood. We're talking anything, any porn adaptation. Please no.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Please no. Yeah, I mean,
Bang Bus, the MMO.
I do think that there are those games out there.
I mean, yeah,
it's already a market.
There's a rule about that.
A lot of the media I can think of that I'm thinking really doesn't need a video game. There's already a video game.
But
Rule 34, Annex A, video games.
But franchises, there's definitely some franchises that are just like, what would you do with them? Like, I don't know why it comes to mind, but Monk, the video game.
Oh, but that could be really good.
It could be a detective video game.
If it's a puzzle game, a Monk puzzle game, are you kidding? That would be really good.
Figure out how to investigate the clues without touching anything.
Or you have to do this, but you have to touch every pole. And if you don't touch the poles, like, that's your life. Right? Like, your life is going to go down if you don't touch the poles.
Walk down the sidewalk, but only touch the tiles in a series of prime numbers.
Don't step on any cracks. No, that could actually be a really fun game. And if Tony Shalhoub did some voice work, I would buy it 100%.
There's a lot of things like let's go with more recency bias in my brain. The Rookie, the video game. It's just a cop simulator, but with weird cases.
No, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. I don't need any more cop game. Although I did like, what was it? Hogan's Alley. I was a big fan of Hogan's Alley. That was it, right? I'm remembering that game. It was a shooting game. You used the
gun.
The gun.
Okay, now I'm thinking, did they make a Hogan's Heroes video game?
No, not a Hogan's Heroes, but yeah, it was kind of like Duck Hunt, except
Duck Hunt, the video game. Let's go.
But if they haven't made a Hogan's Heroes video game.
Duck Hunt was a video game.
Or, wait, oh no, I think it exists. Give me a second.
Duck Hunt the movie, the video game.
Yeah, where you're just trying to shoot a dog.
You don't try to shoot the dog, you just shoot the dog.
After he laughs at you once, you're like,
I'm sorry, they do have it. MASH, the video game.
It wasn't a chicken. All right. And on that note,
that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
We'll see you soon on your wish list for Nutty Bites, the video game,
with optional Sonorous Vox DLC.
And I'd like to just do a huge shout out to our patrons, those wonderful people that are donating to help keep us going. I will be putting the poll for the last quarter Patreon donation. Anyway, I'm going to put the poll up for where we're going to donate the last quarter of 2024 on Patreon very soon, probably tonight. So you might even get it before you see this episode. But thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. We have more episodes coming. I will tell you, I had an episode recorded on January and still haven't edited it. This is what happened. But we put this one together for you, and I think this one, nobody swore. So, yeah, it was easy to put out. So thank you so much to our top tier, our big daddies, starting with the top. Thank you to Jax, thank you to Jason, and thank you to Rich the TT. The patrons of the arts, thank you to Kaylin, Hugh, Mark, and needed one, Mark's on there. And thank you to Susanna and to all the other patrons who keep things going. The lifeblood of this campaign. Thank you to Shane, Selganor, Cliff, Greg, Harold, Ian, Ken, Kinsey, Melissa, Mike, Nix, Radical Geek, Will, and Zachary. Thank you so much, all of you. And a special shout out to a former patron, but also regular listener. Thank you to Steve. We're thinking about you, and you are in our hearts. So hopefully when you listen to this,
Nutty Bites is produced by Nimlas Studios under a Creative Commons Attribution No Commercial Non-Derivatives 3.0 International License. That means you can't change it without my permission. You can share it and send it to your friends. Just link back to me, my site, and everything. We live at nimlas.org, which has links to everything social media, including facebook.com/group/nuttybites and patreon.com/nukejoss, or call 347-NUTTY42.
Hi. I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite podcast on the Citadel.